Hi, this is Evan, and I'm your host for Wine Couch TV. As we so often do, this week's episode will focus on two wines, the foods that go with them, and a little bit of information about the regions and the grape from which they're made. This week's wine is Malbec. Now, Malbec is a fun grape. Although it originated in France and can still be found throughout the Southwest and most specifically in the appellation of Cahors, where it used to be known as the black wine because of its intense color, most people today associate with Malbec with the grape from Argentina. And in fact, it is the most important grape in Argentina, planted throughout the country and does really, really well just about everywhere you plant it. Argentina's biggest and most important appellation is Mendoza, and this is where we see a grape like Malbec absolutely thrive. As always, let's go ahead and taste a couple. The first wine we're going to have today is from a wonderful producer called Trapiche, and this is their 2006 vintage. It comes from the overall area of Mendoza and comes from various different Malbec vineyards throughout the larger appellation. It's a wonderful wine, very consistent, and always delivers on price. And this wine is, once again, an everyday priced wine. So like other wines that we've covered before, you don't necessarily have to spend a lot of wine to get a lot of pleasure factor. Let's go ahead and taste it. Malbec generally has a fairly rich and dark color to it. I would expect that there. It's got a lot of pigment, it needs sun to ripen, and it's going to have sort of a black, ruby, dark, almost purpley sort of color to it. And this wine is no different. In the nose, I get that classic plummy, deep berry character that is so characteristic of Argentina and specifically in Mendoza. In France, Malbec comes from the word literally bad mouth. Bad being mal, bec being a colloquial word for mouth. And the wines in France tend to be harder, leaner, austere, a bit more astringent, and very, very grippy. This wine from Mendoza has a little bit of muscle and a little bit of sinew, but it's much more approachable as that deep, beautiful red character shows. I also find notes of licorice, notes of a little bit of caramel from the oak that it's aged in, and a very round, approachable nose. Let's taste. This wine has a very generous palate. It's round, it's medium to medium full-bodied, and it covers the full palate. The flavor delivery and the attack is extremely consistent with what we saw in the nose. So again, we've got plums, we've got a little bit of licorice or anise in it, we have just a hint of sweetness, sort of a caramel or almost molasses character, and a very round, juicy mid-palate to it. The wine is nice, it has a moderate finish on it, and again, for an everyday price point, delicious, flavorful, and a real good value for the money. Let's jump up a notch and take ourselves to a whole different level. The second wine we're going to be trying is a wine called Luca. And Luca is produced by a woman, a very dear friend of mine, I might add, named Laura Catena, whose father, Nicholas Catena, is really the godfather of all things wine in Argentina. And this is a wine that Laura makes on a proprietary basis that's named for her son, Luca. It's a wonderful wine. It's definitely a heavy package, a big presentation, and carries a slightly heftier price tag. This one is definitely what I would call the more splurge level of pricing. Let's go ahead and taste it. Right off the bat, we can see that it has a much deeper, almost opaque purple sort of color, a lot of extract, a lot of concentration, and I would expect that the wine that follows is going to be a fairly ample wine, which we will do now. Let's taste it, or smell it. This wine is exploding with a sort of dusty character of sweet earth, but just packed with fruit. I get just concentration of deep black berries, again a sort of damson plum level of character, a sweet anise type flavor, a little bit of black olive, and then just this wonderful veneer of sweet oak across the top that's adding a lightly smoky, toasty, but otherwise sort of sweet spice and brown sugar type of element to it. It's an incredibly complex nose for what will certainly be an incredibly complex wine. That's a mouthful of wine. This is a very big, almost brooding wine. It's rich, it's powerful, it's concentrated. It needs a lot of time in the bottle to age, and it will be really, really delicious in time, although it's certainly enjoyable now. When I think of Malbec with food, I think of what they do in Argentina. In Argentina, you're basically either Italian or Spanish, and you're either eating large slabs of flesh or you're eating pizza and pasta. First here, red meat. Asado, traditional in Argentina, is actually a wonderful natural match for Malbec. And whether you're having a French version or an Argentine version, its rich, juicy style and ample tannins are a wonderful foil for those big pieces of red meat. I also like it a lot with dishes that are more stew-like. So whether you're having a meal in a bowl soup thing, very hearty, rich, or whether you're having a thicker stew like a cassoulet or something, a Malbec will always be very, very traditional and will work extremely well. Finally, I like sort of matches of root vegetables and fruit, dried fruit with meat. So whether you're having a lamb stew with prunes, or whether you're having a richer stew that has parsnips and rutabagas and things like that, that also picks up really well on both the earthy nature that Malbec has as well as its rich fruit nature. And finally, this is a wine that actually works quite well with blue cheese, which is not always the case with red wines. So if you stick on the sweeter side of blue cheese, say more Cambozola, more Gorgonzola Dolce Latte, and other softer blues, you're going to have a really, really nice match here. As always, we're going to conclude with our Wine Couch TV word of the week. And this week's word is Rio Negro. Actually, it's a region, not quite a word, but Rio Negro is an appellation in the far southern part of Argentina. Next stop is the South Pole. And here, because it's cooler, you're still at relatively high altitudes, but rather than being just driven by Malbec, which is what most of Argentina's red wines are, or Cabernet or Syrah, here being cooler, they really excel in producing Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. So next time you go to the store and you want to be a little bit experimental, look for Pinot Noirs and Chardonnays from the Rio Negro area of Argentina. Again, that's about all the time we have today. So until next time, this is Evan Goldstein. You take care, and we'll see you soon.